Mexico has got to help us at the border. If they're not going to help us at the border, it's a very sad thing between two countries. Mexico has got to help us at the border. And a lot of people are coming in because they want to take advantage of DACA.
We certainly understand the concern not only that President Trump has, but people in the United States here have about immigration. What we're trying to do precisely is to work with the United States and Central Americans.
Mexican ambassador on the show earlier, the president, the administration talking about concerns along the border. This, as the Washington Post is just moving a story, citing multiple sources, saying the Trump administration is working to speed up deportations and impose quotas on immigration judges. In other words, to get the guidelines for a new quota system to ensure that the cases are completed in a timely, efficient, and effective manner. The concern being about this caravan of immigrants coming across or to the border in coming days, we believe. Let's bring in our panel. Matt Schlapp, contributor with The Hill. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics and host of No Labels Radio on SiriusXM. And Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com. All right, Matt, we should clarify that the president said they were going to come across to take advantage of DACA. You can't do that.
Well, you can, in the sense that people confuse all these terms. You have DACA, which is for a certain period of time, but then you have this group of people that folks call dreamers. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. Every day, every week on that border, there are unaccompanied minors, and minors who actually are accompanied, who by our own law, we have to accept into the country. So the idea that there are illegal people coming to this country very regularly under our laws is one of these loopholes that President Trump wants to stop. He wants to stop this catch and release, this insane problem that leads us to this whole question of amnesty 10, 20 years later.
You know, I've asked the Mexican ambassador about the Mexico laws, which are very strict on immigration. They deport tens of thousands.
Repatriate, Brett.
Repatriate, he said, in numerous different ways today. But, you know, it's the same issue, different country.
Right. I think that in your interview, you know, what was clear and what is more important than President Trump, you know, getting a lot of backlash from conservatives after signing a spending bill that everyone's upset about, you know, just trying to really galvanize people about a caravan and what he calls democratic laws that are weak on immigration and Democrats not wanting borders and everything. The most important thing here is that is him using Mexico as a cudgel, and NAFTA and the negotiations that are very sensitive and ongoing for a year. Republicans are very concerned about what the state of these negotiations are. And when he uses his sort of political bullying on Twitter over immigration and this caravan arriving and the Mexicans having a cash cow, which is NAFTA, and I'll punish them this way to get what I want out of them on immigration at the border, using NAFTA, that is the place where this becomes incredibly serious. He and DHS and if there's a legislative fix, can do what they can go ahead and try to mitigate this problem at the border. That's separate from the very sensitive negotiations with Mexico over NAFTA right now.
If you look at his negotiating style, some would say that Kim Jong-un is at the table because he was aggressive like this. AB's right. It's very sensitive. They're very the negotiations are pretty detailed and complex on NAFTA, but supporters would say, why not?
I think the argument from Trump supporters would be vis-a-vis Kim Jong-un being at the negotiating table at all and being willing to meet with the president is the unpredictability of the president and his administration, where I think for the first time in a long time in Pyongyang, there are people wondering, are the Americans going to stick to the international script that we've become very accustomed to, or is he going to go rogue and do whatever he wants?
But does that work with Mexico, I guess is my question.
And I think that is a legitimate question to ask, because I think the Mexican government, you were sitting next to their ambassador moments ago, they're probably sitting in Mexico City wondering, okay, if the president is willing to blow up these negotiations over NAFTA because of border security issues in this caravan, maybe we can throw some bones to the Americans on internal enforcement to show that we're doing our part on our northern border, and then maybe get them off our back, because that should be a separate issue. Making it convoluted and all this cross-pollination is very difficult, frankly, for some of us to keep track of sometimes. I don't even know if it's strategic specifically, but the general unpredictability may sometimes lead to positive outcomes.
You know, the president says and tweets a lot of things, but behind the scenes, you had the Secretary of Homeland Security traveling to Mexico a couple of weeks ago, meeting with officials, dealing with security on their southern border. So things are happening outside the sound and fury, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, this is working. The idea that the president goes out, mostly on Twitter, but in other venues as well, makes it very clear over and over again what he expects from the American government's point of view. And there's no question that it brings people to the table. There's no question that DHS is working with their counterparts in the Mexican government. And I think it's really important what everyone has said on this panel. They repatriated over 250,000 people in Mexico. Mexico would not accept a child at the border. Their laws don't say they have to accept them like we have to accept them. We should have laws that are sane and that bring us security at the border, just like all these other countries we're dealing with. It actually makes a lot of sense.
Senator Dianne Feinstein, AB, tweeting, President Trump is absolutely wrong on DACA. He unilaterally rescinded DACA for no reason and has rejected every single bipartisan proposal that would protect dreamers from deportation. Simply false to say that Democrats walked away from the table. Where is the ground truth on this?
Well, the truth is that there have been bipartisan proposals on DACA, and it obviously is something that really should be solved in a bipartisan way. But the truth is that when the president offered his own plan, which it was a four-pronged approach.
Chain migration and other elements of it.
Many in his party thought 1.8, they called it amnesty, legalization for 1.8 million beyond the pool of what Matt was referring to as the precise DACA population was a non-starter with conservative Republicans. So it's really unfair for him to say that the Democrats killed it and the Democrats don't want borders and everything. Yeah, the Democrats want a sweeter DACA deal that doesn't involve a lot of border wall money. They would like to, give some stuff for existing fixes to existing fences. They have not come far on exchanging a border wall for a DACA fix.
So you don't think a $25 billion, allotment or down the road tied to DACA would pass?
I actually think that it would. It would be a bipartisan bill. It would have to be a majority. You get around these rules of whether or not. I think it would. It would depend. It would depend. Exactly what the terms were. Yeah, they don't want the chain migration and the diversity lottery packaged in with that. But it is a problem on the Republican side as well as on the Democratic side. And he said many times to Democrats, including Dianne Feinstein, that he wanted to fix this problem, and now he's walking away. Therefore, her tweet.
So, this is one day. We also have, we didn't talk about it, the China pushback on tariffs. These are big, big things that would be page one, lead of shows, but there's so much.
Yeah. Drinking from a fire hose.
This is another day.
All day, every day. And yes, we are seeing, and this is relatively modest at the moment, but a retaliation from the Chinese, another escalation on the path to what some of us worry would be a trade war. And the U.S. taking shots in that trade war invites retaliation. That's something that does not benefit anyone, and people who believe in free trade think that when you escalate, the other side responds, and consumers in both countries and the economies in both countries lose. And these are the simple rules of economics, and we're seeing them coming to roost in a small way, and the concern is, will it develop? Will it get worse?
We will see how it plays. Panel, thank you.